for this. Audio is also available with call-in, and you can instant message us anytime throughout the presentation. We are trying to put these in the learning management system, so at the end of the presentation, I will ask you to email me, let me know that you attended. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Ellen Dixon.
Good afternoon. Thanks for joining. Looks like we're up to 73 people. That's exciting. Let me see if I can get this to go. All right. Well, let me see if I can, there we go. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about today is what we are implementing in terms of online pay records. I'll give you an overview of how it's going to work and how you can get your project set up and your users. And then we'll talk through the inspector or iPad user viewpoint and how to enter pay records from an iPad. And then we'll go through from the resident office viewpoint of what tools and reports we have to assist, and then a few best practices and advanced features, and we will wrap it up within 2 hours. I hopefully won't take the whole 2 hours, but I'm not sure how long it's going to take, depending on questions. And we'll take questions. If you have questions as you go along, feel free to type them into the chat window, or if we need to stop and have a conversation on audio, we can do that as well. So I welcome questions as we go. All right, so just to give you the background, in November of 2017, my team and I went on a field trip to the Peace Wade Bridges project here in Raleigh. We were just going to a construction site to see how people are using the online construction sites, how inspectors were using the lists on their iPads and so on. And we asked about what else do people have that is still very paper intensive. And they showed us this box of red books and talked to us about pay record books. And I had at that time not really heard of them before. And so we decided we definitely need to help in this arena, because there's so much well, like anything on paper, there's so much risk involved. If a given book is lost, there's also a lot of work to do to draw these lines and manually, set up the books and cross-reference with the contract and so on. And we thought this is something we can make a real difference on if we put this online. And so we have a joint project where we've done a lot of work together with the HiCAMS team. So I have a business analyst and the SharePoint team that we're working with here, and then we have a HiCAMS team that sits here in the same building with us. And so we work closely together with that team to jointly deliver you this solution. Some people said they lost the feed. I don't know if that means if they need to re-log in or what. I don't know. Natalie, is there anything we need to do?
I'll look them up and I'll see if I can connect with them.
Okay. All right. Is everybody here? Well, are you hearing okay, Natalie?
Yes. I can hear you both through the headset and with the phone. You're doing great.
Okay. All right. I'll keep going. All right. So at a high level, what we have rolled out now is the ability to do your pay record reporting online in SharePoint, and it will automatically feed the information into HiCAMS. So what we have is one list for each project line code, like 001 mobilization, for example, and users would enter their pay record information directly into that list in the same manner as you enter in a diary entry or an entry into MRRs or something like that. And you put in basically the same information that you would be putting in if you were handwriting it into the red books.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, was that a question? Okay. And then the resident offices will review and approve the pay records in the same way that they review and approve diaries. And then we have some management reports to help. And so we'll go through this all in detail, but that's kind of the high level detail. But the key difference in it compared to diaries is that when you approve it, when somebody in the resident office approves the record, it will automatically send that information over to HiCAMS. And then if it's successfully added into HiCAMS, then we will lock the record. And so that, so really this makes SharePoint just sort of a glorified front end to HiCAMS for pay records, but it enables you to do it from anywhere, just like everything else you do with your iPad. And it's backed up, it's accessible by multiple people at the same time, all the advantages of having things online. So I'm going to go on. Okay, so at a high level, the process that we used to have on the left was that an inspector would record the pay record information in the red book. They would put in, like for whatever particular pay item it was, they would put in the specific measurements that were needed, and they would use a calculator or a spreadsheet to do their calculations. Then a reviewer might check those calculations and make sure they're correct, and also just make sure there's no typos or things left out. And resident office staff would initial it to indicate that it was approved, and then somebody would copy that information into HiCAMS. That's my understanding of the process the way it was. So the new process is a little shorter. The inspector still has to enter the measurement information into SharePlus in their iPad. They don't have to do the calculations. The calculations will be done for them. A reviewer can still check it, but they hopefully won't have to check that the calculations are correct because the system will be doing them in a consistent manner. They just need to check for typos and complete entries and stuff like that. And then the resident office would approve it in the same way as you approve a diary, and then nobody will have to copy it into HiCAMS because that will automatically be done for you. So hopefully this will be a much shorter process, save you a lot of time at the beginning of the project. Setting up those red books won't have to be done, and then all through you'd be able to save a little bit of time for all the calculations. Okay. So let me just help you a little bit, and we'll hit back on this later. If you'd like to get your project set up, so far we have 60 projects that have requested to be set up for pay records. There is a request button on the front page of the construction sites that you would go to on the PC. In the bottom left, it says Pay Records Requests. And you would request it there, and you'll get this page that's shown here. And you'd go into it and push the button next to Pay Records Activation Request. We are not going to automatically make anybody's existing project move into pay records, because people are, if you're midstream doing red books, it's up to you whether you want to change over the course of a project. At some point this year, I expect us to get to the point where all new projects, as they're activated, will start out with online pay records, but we're never going to force you to take your old projects and move into it, because we don't want to disrupt something that is underway. But if you choose to transition, or if you're in the beginning of a new project and you want to start, you would go in here, press the Submit Request button. It will ask you what contract and who you are and who is the resident or assistant resident on that project, because we want to make sure the resident or assistant resident is informed, even if someone else actually requested it and they're in the loop on that. And then with that first that top button there, it will also give you a place to put in user information. With pay records, people are only logging into SharePoint or SharePlus. They're not logging in to HiCAMS. So when we send this information behind the scenes to HiCAMS, they have to have a way to recognize who the users are. And so we need a one-time setup, because they're going to set up a cross-reference that says, okay, for this person's login on SharePoint, this is who they are to HiCAMS. And so you'll need to fill that in and get each user defined one time into that cross-reference list. And once they're defined for one project, it's the same for all the projects. It's only one time per user. The way we're going to recognize them is by some information that's associated with the NCID. So every user has to have an NCID. If you have a DOT email, then DOT set up an NCID for you, and that's the NCID we'll use. And usually that's the same as your actual username in Outlook. If you do not have a DOT email, then you will need to get an external NCID if you don't already have one. And so we'll work with people if that's necessary, or the help desk support teams can help with that. But that's the way that behind the scenes we're recognizing who is submitting these pay records and who's approving them. One more thing, we had a couple of problems with this. I think it's fixed now, but if you do that pay record request and you fill in the information and it does not send you a confirmation email, then please contact us, because we want to make sure that it actually got into the system. For some reason, we hit a couple of problems where people couldn't write to our list behind the scenes, and then we didn't know people had requested things. So you should get a confirmation email. If you don't, let us know. All right, so once we get your request, then we will get your project set up. Right now, or even before your projects are set up, everyone has a pay record subsite in their construction site, and it will have the 3 lists that start with 000 in it. But what happens when we set it up is we will build out the lists, one for each line code, which will be the place where people actually report pay records. We'll give you an expectation that we'll get this set up within 2 business days. Normally it's actually faster than that, but occasionally there's different holdups. So if you just expect it'll be done within a couple days, we should be good. Design build projects, there's one more thing that's being added from a HighCam support perspective to be able to handle the work accomplished records. And so we expect to be able to support the design build projects by the end of April. So that'll be happening very soon as well. Okay, so for the user setup, I talked to it a little bit already. The HighCams is creating this cross-reference to recognize the users. You have to have an NCID. If you don't have one, you can go to ncid.nc.gov and get a business NCID for free. And we just have to know what that is and set it up. And when you're filling in the information for each user, there's a place to fill in how does HighCams know this user. And some people have a HighCams username if they actually log into HighCams and do things, and other people you would be known to HighCams by your technician ID. So your RD1 number if you're a roadway inspector or whatever technician number that you have that HighCams knows you by, that's what we need you to put in that field. So then pay records would be sent from SharePoint to HighCams with that NCID information, and then HighCams will check that to first figure out who the person is and make sure that the people creating pay records and the people approving pay records are people who are authorized to do so. All right, so let's talk about how do we enter pay records. On an iPad, when you go into a project, you will now see this subsite that says Pay Records Restricted. And all the pay record stuff is in that subsite for each project. So when you open it up, you'll see the 3 control lists that start with 000, and if you have been built out to do pay records, there will be 1 list for each line code in your contract. So you can see this real example here. And you can see how many pay records have been reported in each one of these items, because it tells you, there's been 22 items reported at this time under line code 9. I would just encourage you, as an aside, anytime when you're on the iPad, go up to this little circle arrow and refresh fairly frequently. If there's new lists being added or things being updated, refreshing the page and refreshing in each level, like where all the projects are, within the subsite, things like that. It's it's helpful to refresh these things. They don't automatically refresh in SharePlus. In each list, if you open up a given list and then you go click on the name of the view, which in this case is all items, it'll pop up some information about that list. There's a description. You can click on this little greater than sign to see the whole description. And the description for each list, first thing that's in here, this little code, is the template. We have 38 different formats that pay records are produced in. And Houston Allred helped us with that. I think I saw Houston on one of the people on the line, so he's probably on. And we have mapped, or he has mapped, all of the 1,500 or so different pay items to a specific format. And what that means is when you come into a list, what are the questions it's going to ask you? Because if you are reporting on Barrow excavation, you have different things you need to fill in compared to masonry drainage structures. So you know how that the little red books had different things for different types of pay items. That's what we're trying to do, is sort it out into different formats. And the names of those formats are PR for pay record, and then a dash, and the unit of measure, and then something that helps us keep track of which one is which. And so this one is each. This is for an item that is measured in each. And then we have a little description that kind of at a high level says what is it you're supposed to be putting in here. And when you're going to add an item add a pay record into a list, what you do is choose item. Just like any other list, you click on the little plus sign to add something, and you're going to choose item. Item is the default pay record. And later we'll talk about these other two things that you could add. All right, so what an inspector has to do, and we've found in our pilots that without any training at all, that we have not had a lot of problems. Inspectors have figured this out without too much issues. It's very much the same as everywhere else on the construction sites. You add an item, you fill in the fields that it asks you for, which are generally some kind of location information, like sometimes 1, sometimes 2 stations, either some kind of measurements, or maybe just directly putting in the quantity. The date will default to the current date. The WBS, or the bill to field, will default. If there's only one WBS in the contract, then it'll default to that, so you don't have to type it in. If there are several, then it will be a choice list, and you can just pick which one is applicable. There is a way to get to the help document for that format from within the entry, and I'll show you that in a bit. And then you save it. So basically you just add an item, fill in the information that you would have put on the red book, and hit save. It's pretty easy. So here's an example. This is a lump sum item. So when you open it up, it does have a place for attachments if you have photos or calculations or something like that you need to add. It defaults to today's date. You have a place to put in station and location. For resurfacing projects, you might want to put in the map number. For lump sum, we're looking for a portion, pay record portion here. And so I will mention a couple times that if you need to put in a decimal fraction, like if you would have put in 0.2, you need to put in 0.2. It has to start with a 0, and that's a SharePlus limitation. It won't let you put in a number that starts with a decimal point. And then the bill to is going to be the WBS, the default WBS for this. And then there's a place to put in comments. As with all the rest of the lists that you have, if there is more information about a given field, there's a little I with a circle around it over on the right, and you can click on that and it'll pop up with some instructions or more information. The rest of this lump sum form, we do have the ability to mark it as do not pay. If it's marked as do not pay, it does not actually go to HiCAMS at this point. It just sits on the SharePoint side until you change that again later. For lump sum, we found that people needed to affirm that the work was completed in accordance with plans and specifications, so we're providing a way to do that with just a simple slider. In all pay records, you'll see a place to mark that has been reviewed, again a slider, and a place to put review comments. And then there's a link to the help document for this specific help guide. And if you're on an iPad and you click on this little globe, it will take you straight to it. So if you're like, wait a minute, I don't know what I'm supposed to put in this affirm field, what does it mean? You can click on that and go to the help document. If there are substitutable materials on a line code, then you will see a field called submaterials, and it will show up a pop-up, and you are supposed to, and it's scrollable. You may have to, this particular one, you'd have to scroll down and see the choices for C. You are supposed to choose one choice from each group, and so it'll be a group name like A, B, or C. Could be one, could be whatever. There's a group name, and then there's the choices in that group. So in this case, you're supposed to pick one from A, one from B, and one from C. And if you don't do that, then whenever it gets approved and sent to HighCams will send back an error that says, hey, you didn't do your substitutable materials right. So they're forcing you to pick, we are forcing you to pick the substitutable materials if they are applicable. So if everything in a given line code is one material, then we don't ask you what it is because HighCams already knows what it is. So here's another format example, is excavation. This is one of the more complicated ones because it has 3 different ways, and this is really the only one that has 3 different ways you can measure excavation. So the pay items that use this format, they will explain it. There's a help document, but basically you have a choice of 3 different ways to measure it. The first is the average end area method, and you would have to put in this x1, y1, z1, x2, y2, z2. Here's the diagram, and as you know how to do that. And we will calculate the distance between station 1 and 2 to use as the length. If you need us to use a field measured length, you would put in this field measured length, and we will use that instead. The second choice would be aerial area, and this will probably be at the end of the project, and you get just a grand total from photogrammetry, and you just put in that field the total amount of cubic yards, and that's all you have to do, rather than you would just leave all these other things blank. And the third choice is truck. A choice of truck, that's actually a pull-down choice list, and the number of loads. If you want to do truckloads, then you go into this control list called 000 truck measurements. You define a specific truck, you put in all the measurements, and it calculates out what cubic yardage that truck has, and you would choose it here, and then say how many loads it was, and it will reference to that list to find out how many cubic yards for the truck, and then multiply it by how many loads for the pay record. There's more details on how we do the calculations in the help document, and again you can click on the globe to go straight to the help document. So you can see a couple different ones here. We have 38 different formats. We are still in early days, and so I won't guarantee you that there's no errors anywhere in any of the formats. So if you discover an error in any of our calculations, or that things are mapped to the wrong format or something like that, please send an email to us at Construction Help, and we will work with you and figure out what needs to be done. Here's some more detail on the truck measurements. So if you measure each truck, then you're measuring the length, the width, the height. You actually measure that boom thing in a couple different measurements, height and width of that and depth of that, and it subtracts out the shrinkage, and it does all that stuff, and it comes up with the final cubic yards for that truck. And then it will take the name of the truck, here's triaxle, and the truck resulting cubic yards, and put that together as a choice. And so when you pick from the drop down, it'll look more like this. So do you want the quad axle that's 16.56 cubic yards, or do you want a dual axle that's 10, or the triaxle that's 10, so on. So that's the kind of the way it looks like. We have an error right now that we have found in truck measurements that we're going to fix, which is basically that if people change something after they've added a truck, then it's not following over and reflecting correctly. So basically, I'm just going to say don't change truck measurements. If you put it in and it's wrong and you need to change it, you can talk to us, but we'd rather you just add a whole new truck in the list, and we'll figure out how to deal with it a little bit later. Okay, some general notes about pay record entries. We offer field measured fields in a few places, particularly where there are the opportunity for irregular shapes. So, and it'll say on the information pop-up what is that field measured field going to replace. And so in general, that would replace us doing some calculation. So field measured length might replace us figuring out the straight distance between two stations. There's some other ones you'll find in different templates. So just read the information if it's not obvious, and we will also be happy to answer questions. But that in general is if you're measuring something instead. If that you are doing some irregular shaped area or measurement, then from an auditability point of view, it would be best if you would spell that out either in words or a diagram. And if you need to draw up a diagram of how you came up with some measurement, then just take a photo of that calculation and attach it to your pay record, because we want to make sure that whatever we report is ultimately auditable. I mentioned already that fractional quantities do need to start with a 0 for SharePlus to take it. Talked about photo calculations, drainage structures, end walls. There's a few of them that we're really just saying, hey, calculate it elsewhere, take a picture of the calculation. As usual, you can take photos of completed work. We do the calculations and we do the unit of measure conversion. So if you are measuring acres and you're measuring things in feet, we will convert that to, we'll calculate the square feet and convert that into acres. So you don't have to do those conversions. Once the pay records are approved and in HighCamps, they're locked, and you will not be able to save changes. You'll be able to go in to edit on it, but when you save it, it won't save. It won't change anything. So once they're locked, I'll tell you later in this presentation what you have to do if you really made a mistake and needed to make a change. And we also have the ability to mark a line code as complete or not used with a special kind of entry in the pay record table. So I know this is a lot of text on this one. All right, so recording line code status. When all the work for a line code is complete, and particularly if you didn't use all the quantity that was originally allocated, it would be good to record the line code status to indicate that it's complete or that it was not used at all. And that way, when we're doing overrun and soon underrun reporting, that we'll be able to know that information. So it doesn't really do anything besides get referenced by those kinds of reports, but it's useful just to record that. And for that, you would choose, instead of item, you would choose record line code status, and you're basically just choosing from a status of it was not used or it was completed. You can add some notes if you like, and that's it. It's just going to show up in the list. Changing views. This is not just for pay records. This is for using the iPad in general. Views in all the lists show up under the name of the list when you open up the list in the iPad. It defaults to this kind of a format where you only see the title and 4 fields, which is not a lot. So it's what SharePlus calls the table format. So I'm going to show you how to change that. So if you click on the name of the view, which in this case is all items, I told you before about the description is there, but you choose here, change to grid instead of table, and that will change you to a format that lays out all the columns more like what you would see on the PC. Also, you'll see the views. The default one here is the first one, all items, but you can scroll this up and use your finger and scroll it up and see what are the different views that you have to choose between. So in this case, there are actually 5 different views, and I think this is the same in almost all of the pay records. Is we have this all items view that generally is just a sort of summary view. We have a view that's specifically for approving and rejecting items, and it groups them so you can see, what status those are in. The detail view shows you the ID number of this specific pay record, which you will need if you want to make an adjustment to it. And it will also show if there are any interim calculations that we had different fields for. We can show you what those are, like if you want to see what the average width was, or some kind of interim stop on the calculation. If there's lots of pay records in there and you really just want to see the ones you put in, you can look at My Submissions. And then if there was an error, the status view gives more information about what the error was. There are 2 status fields in each pay record. The approval status is the same as everywhere else in construction sites that says, has the resident office approved this entry? It starts out as pending, and if they approve it, it goes to approved, and if they reject it, it goes to rejected. If you approve a pay record, it will send it to HighCams. And then we have a different status field where we store what did HighCams tell us about this entry. Did they accept it? So if they accept the record and enter it into HighCams and everything was good to go, then we will change this to locked. And if it's locked, you won't be able to edit the record. If they had some kind of problem, then it will say error. And spread and do not pay we'll talk about later, but there's 2 different status fields. And so you can see, let me go see if I can go back for a second. You can see over here, this PR status, that's locked. We put that here so that people don't waste time going in trying to edit records that are already locked. So if you see that it's locked, then you're not going to be able to change it. You think you're going in to edit, but when you save it, it doesn't save anything. So one last thing to notice, just like anywhere else in the construction sites with the iPad, if we make a change to the structure of a list, then your iPad, if it has an internal copy of the structure, and it will get confused because it doesn't match, and so you'll get weird errors. So if you try to go into a pay record list or try to add a pay record and you can't get into it, or you get a weird error message, you're going to need to refresh cache. Same as everywhere else. The cache is part of the memory of the iPad. And so basically it's saying, let's clear out the memory, get a new copy of what this list looks like so that I understand what the structure is. And so as always, but just as a reminder, you press down on the name of the list or library where you're having the problem. And if you press down hard on it, it'll pop up with this little actions menu. You choose edit settings, and then you choose refresh cache. And then you say yes to the question that says, do you really want to do this? And then you click on done to get out. And then that should fix your problem. If if that doesn't fix your problem, you can email us at Construction Help. Okay, that was pretty much all that I had for the iPad users. Now let's move into managing the pay records from the resident office point of view. So the resident office are going to be reviewing the pay records, approving and rejecting them, and using some reports that we have. So on the home page of the project, from a PC perspective, you will see at the bottom left, pay records restricted. And that is in every site, whether pay records lists have been created or not, you do have the subsite. I'll probably come back to using Chrome or something besides IE in a few places. So once you get into it, you'll see at the top we have just a little high-level introduction about what is pay records, and we have a link to an overview of pay records. So if you want a reminder of how pay records is supposed to work, that's a link to that help document. So HighCAMS is writing out your contract, including supplemental agreements, other adjustments to this project line codes list. We did an initialization about a month ago, and I would say within the next week or so, HighCAMS will be automatically updating things within an hour or two of you changing them in HighCAMS. So that is working in our test environment, and it's kind of working its way up through to production. So it should be coming up pretty soon. Right now, if you have pay records started and then you do a supplemental agreement or something, you need to let us know so we can go get the updates and put them in here. Very soon it will be coming in automatically. So they maintain these two lists, the project line codes, which basically has every line code, what's the pay item and the quantity and the unit price and all that information, and then a separate list that has all the substitutable materials choices for each line code. The truck measurements list is used by the end users, by you guys. These two lists you can look at if you want to, but you can't change them. But the truck measurements is for you. If you're going to use trucks to measure in truckloads with your excavation measurements, then you would need to put truck measurements into the truck measurements list, and then those will show up as a choice list in your excavation lists. We do not create lists for ticket book items. So you'll see, those will be missing from here. You still have to do ticket books the same way you do them today. There's no change. That's not automated. We do reach into the ticket book summary list with some of these reports that we'll tell you about, but they are not automated at this time. Okay, so also if you have a really lot of line codes, sometimes it's a lot of pages to flip through. You can see here on this one, Jason has 434 line codes in here, so you can just put in the number or you can put in the word and it will kind of search this list and shorten it down to something that matches what you put in to help you more quickly navigate to that list. And then you see here we have a bunch of different reports, which I will go through to show you how you can use those to help you. If you go into a given list on a PC, you'll see the description at the top. Again, the first thing you'll see is what is the template or the format that we're using for this pay record, and then a description for this format, what it was that we're expecting you to do. And you can see we talked about excavation earlier. This one says you're going to enter in one of these three ways, and then it refers you to the spec book, the applicable spec book. If it is a 2012 spec book project, then it refers you to the exact section of the spec book. If it's a 2018, it's really just going to link to the beginning of the spec book because we don't have that one broken out into individual sections. But in any case, you would be able to link to the applicable spec book and scroll to where you need if you want to refer to it. And in the 000 project line codes list, it does have the section of the spec book that applies in there. So if you needed to look that up, that's also information you can find. And so here's what the all items list looks like on just about every list. It'll have a title field. We default it to pay record, but you can change it if you want. The date of the pay record in most recent to oldest order. If it's been sent successfully and logged in HighCAMS, it's going to be locked. Here was the final quantity, unit price, and amount, and who it's being billed to. We have an adjustment capability. Like we had one that was put in here for 846, and then we put in another one to subtract off 846. So you can have an adjustment quantity, and we'll talk about adjustment pay records in a bit. All right. So in general, here's a sort of a high-level description of the process. The inspector or somebody creates the pay record entry and puts an item in the pay record list. Then whoever's supposed to review it can use the pending report to identify items that are in pending status to review. And we have a pending report now available on the regular construction site as well, because there are so many things and so many lists, and you don't know, where is there something waiting for your approval. And so that is a way to quickly summarize, these are the lists that actually have pay records in them that are waiting for somebody to review or approve. A reviewer can mark it as reviewed when they're done reviewing it. If they have any comments, they can put it in the review comments. And then similarly, the resident office staff that's getting ready to approve it would use the pending report to see what's waiting for me to approve. And then they can go approve it. Just like the other lists that have restricted deletion, which is the MRRs, the diaries, payment data, can't remember if there's any others. These records can be edited and changed around up until the point they're approved. They can be deleted by the resident only, basically by the same person or people who can delete those other restricted records if it's in pending status. They cannot be deleted or changed if they are in locked status. So once they're finished being edited and reviewed and changed and whatever needs to be done to them and they're ready to approve them, the resident office person can approve it, and then it will be sent to HiCAMS. I do want to note that this is not instantaneous. It takes usually maybe a minute, but occasionally several minutes to work its way through the system, get into HiCAMS, get logged in over there, and come back and change the status to locked. So we do have something that will, if you try to approve it twice, within quick succession, we will pop up an error for you that says, hey, you've already sent this approval, don't do it again. But, there are ways people can mess themselves up. So I'll just ask you to try not to do that. Just approve it once, and then, it'll eventually come back and say either locked or error. You have to refresh your screen to see that PR status updated. And when I say you can mess yourself up, you're not going to accidentally be able to get it into HiCAMS twice, but you can manage to cause yourself an error that we will have to help you unravel. Okay, so basically SharePoint will send the pay record over to HiCAMS. HiCAMS will check who submitted, who was the creator for this record, and are they somebody who's authorized to enter pay records for this project, and who approved this pay record, and are they somebody who is authorized to approve pay records for this project. And if everything checks out, like did we do all the substitutable materials that we're supposed to, whatever the checks are, HiCAMS has a lot of different checking that it normally does. If it passes all those checks, it will log it into the system just as same as if somebody had manually put it into HiCAMS, and then it will confirm the status back to SharePoint, and we will change that PR status column to reflect that. Okay, so what happens if we get an error? If it came back successfully, it'll be locked, and we've talked about that a couple times. If it says error, that means something was wrong. So there's two different ways you can see what was wrong. One is in the views, and this is on a PC, but you can choose the view on an iPad just as well. There's a view called status, and the status view will show you what was this return text that came back from HiCAMS. And sometimes you can look at it and figure out what you need to do. Like if it says the creator was not recognized by HiCAMS, you can go, oh, I need to go add that person to that cross-reference and get them set up. So you might not even need to ask us about that. If you get a more confusing error like this, you might have to ask us. In this particular case, it's a timeout. You can just try approving it again, and chances are it'll work fine the next time. if you get an error and you don't know what to do about it, just write to construction help and we will help fix that. The other way you can see the summary of the problems is if you go to the reject and error report, which will summarize the rejected items and the items that have an error across all of your pay record lists. So what happens if you put in a pay record and you approved it and it's all locked and everything, and now you realize you made a mistake and you need to fix it? Well, you can't change a locked record, but what you can do is you can put in an adjustment. So let's say you put in a record that you accidentally had a finger check and you typed in 1,000 when you meant to put in 100. And you actually approved it all the way through, and now you realize when you're doing some preparing for your estimates, you're like, oh, that's not what I meant to do. So I put in 1,000, I meant to put in 100. So what I can do is I can put in an adjustment pay record for -900. So basically you're going to either add or subtract a quantity directly. You're not putting in measurements, you're just directly changing the quantity, or you can add comments or attachments. So these are the different things you can do, and you can do any combination of those. You can either add or subtract a quantity, and you can put in additional comments or attachments. And that is the unit of measure of the line code. So let's say it was acres and you'd done all this measuring in feet and you did it wrong. The line code itself is measured in acres. So your adjustment needs to be in acres. It's not going to be in feet. So just be careful about that, that if you're adjusting it, you're using the actual unit of measure of the line code. So you would put in, you want to refer to the line code, or to the pay record entry, I'm sorry, that you are adjusting. And there's a unique ID number for each record within the list. And it's just the order that the record was put in this list. So you would go to the detail view and figure out the ID number of the record you're trying to adjust. And the first record that's put in there is 1, and the second 2, and so on. So it's pretty self-explanatory what the ID number is, but it doesn't change. So if you say, okay, ID number 3 is the record that I want to change, and you make a note of it was put in March 15th, then when you do an adjustment pay record, you're going to use those two pieces of information, what ID number and the date, the pay record date of the one that was put in. So you would go in, say, I want to do an adjustment pay record. If you're on the iPad, you choose it from the little plus sign. If you are on the PC, you have to go up to the items menu. At the top left of inside the list, there's browse items list. If you choose items, it will show you a ribbon of the things you can do with individual items, and you pull down this little pull down next to new item, and you'll see adjustment pay record is one of the choices. So you would choose adjustment pay record and add that kind of an item. And when you go, then it'll pop up the information you need to add. You would put that, instead of the today's date, you would put the date that you're trying to adjust. So if I was adjusting a record from March 15th, I think somebody needs to go on mute. Ryan Gross needs to go on mute. PR date, you'd change that to the date that matches the record you're adjusting, and then put in the ID of the original pay record as the adjustment pay record. And then the quantity here, you could change it to a negative quantity by putting a dash in front of it, or just add the other quantity. And that is the quantity it's going to just add in. And then we do require, if you're doing an adjustment, you need to put in some comments explaining why are you making an adjustment. And then you have just the standard other things. Who is it being billed to? You have additional comments you can make about the pay record in general. You can mark it do not pay. You can review it, and then eventually the resident office can approve it. So that's the same. All the rest of that's the same as every other pay record. So let me talk about reports. We have some reports we've provided. We do plan to do more. If there are reports that you would like to see that would help you, that are basically things we can do by manipulating the information that we have on the SharePoint side, then we'd be happy to do those. We do not have live access to information that's on the HighCam side. So, well, I'll tell you about each of these individual reports, but in general, we have a pending report to help you identify pay records that are in pending status, a pay estimate prep report to give you a preview, and that would include items that are not yet approved, so that can help you decide maybe which items should be approved. It doesn't. Put your friends on mute. It does not include the do not pay items or items that are in rejected or error status. And you can choose for that to include the ticket book entries if you'd like. We have an overrun report, a do not pay report, and a reject and error report. Do note that if you think about how this report is going to have to work, if the report is going to have to look at every pay record and every list, and you have 400 plus items on your list, it's going to take a few minutes to run. And so IE is the slowest browser. I would pick one of the other browsers if that you are trying to kick off one of these reports and looking through every single pay record, because you may have to let it sit there and run for a little while. So the pending report, it shows the count and the link to each list that has items in pending. And this is an example of what it looks like. So it shows you, this week we had changes made in these 5 lists, and this is how many items that are in there that are in pending status. So that can keep you from having to hunt through all the lists to see what's changed. And again, we have a pending report also on your main construction site that looks at all the other lists and libraries that have things that need to be approved, not the pay records. This is like a separate pending report for the pay records. So that is hopefully a useful report for you. So if you choose one of those items out of the pending report and say, hey, I want to go, it'll go directly to the approve reject items page, and it groups them on this page so that you see the pending. There's 2 items that are pending. They have not been reviewed yet. If you were the reviewer, you could go in them and review them. If you want to approve them, you can approve them. I realized looking at this yesterday that we need to make a couple of tweaks to this view to make it easier to quickly open or quickly check off different pay records in here, and rather than having to do them one at a time. So you'll see some changes come into this view soon. Pay estimate prep report includes all the pay records that are in pending or approved status for the specified date range. When you click into the date field, it should pop up with a little calendar. If it does not pop up with a little calendar, refresh the screen so that you can get it, because just entering the date for some reason does not work. So, but it should work with a little pop-up, and you can put in whatever date range you want. And you can choose if you want to pull in the ticket book items by checking in this little box. And so here's an example of what that looks like. I don't know why I have a circle around this. This report, one thing to note about this is if you change like midstream and you're now doing pay records, but previously you were entering things directly into HighCams, we don't again have any access as to what you put into HighCams the old way. So this is only going to include those pay records that were entered in SharePoint. Also, we do not have access to things like incentive payments in HighCams. So there's a couple things you still may need to do manually. Oh, I know what this circle is supposed to be. This circle is supposed to be around this export to Excel. So I just wanted to point out that you can download this to Excel if you would like to be able to manipulate that, add in your incentive payments, and so on. But this hopefully will get you most of the way there. You can see the ticket book items are denoted as ticket book, so this was brought over from the ticket book summary list. and there's a line item total. It should be ticket books. I think it has to do one line for each item entry in the ticket books, but for the regular pay record books, there will be one line for each combination of line code and WBS. So if you have or bill to, which I call it, so it's a WBS, or it could be like this WBS with supplemental agreement 4. So you would have, if you had like a supplemental agreement, that it would have one line for the original contract, one line for 24 with supplemental agreement, and then it would have a line item total. So it separates those out, and you can manipulate them in Excel if you like. The overrun report, you can run against one line code, or you can run against the whole project, and it compares the quantity in the pay records versus the original contract quantity, and indicate whether it's an overrun and how much of an overrun it is. We do not yet have an underrun report, but hope to implement one sometime. The reject and error report runs for a specified date range to identify pay records that need more attention. Like if you rejected, if the resident office rejects a pay record because people didn't fill in enough information or for whatever reason, then it will continue to show up on this list, on this report, until you get it, they get it straightened out and you have changed it to approved. Or if it was rejected, so if the approval status is rejected, it'll be included in this list. Or if the PR status, which is the status of going to HiCAMS, is error, it will be included on this list. So this is basically a summary of those items that need more attention to get them complete. And so you can see if that it was rejected by HiCAMS, then it will have that that text field that says what it was that HiCAMS told us. And so that may or may not be helpful to you, but you know, that would be what we would look at in IT if we were trying to help you fix this problem. Note, like many of these, it takes a while to run on large projects, so use Chrome or Edge or something instead of IE. Do not pay report. This is a brand new report that's coming out, and I was having troubles with it yesterday, so you can see it wasn't even running for me. And we're going to add in the description of the line code. That was an oversight, but basically what we're going to do now is if you mark an item as do not pay, then it will stay on the SharePoint side. It won't actually go to HiCAMS yet until such time as you mark it, if you take that back off and let it be paid. This is going to be a summary of what are the items that are marked as do not pay, and so that way if you want to have take a picture of this report and send it to your contractor and discuss why are we not paying for these items, then you would have a quick summary of that. And you can look through a given date range on this as well. Map reference is if you have a resurfacing project and you just want to make a note for use by your inspectors to say, if you have a lot of different WBSs and they're having to put the WBS into the each pay record, you want to make sure they're using the correct one. And this is just a reminder to say what WBS are you supposed to be using for what map. It's not really automatic. It's sort of like here's a Post-it note where you just write this information down and they can go look at it. But it's just a way to keep that information where everybody can see it. And so you could write, you're basically just filling in what WBS applies to which maps. Sometimes you get a project where it would be helpful if we could help change the name on the line code for you, because you get this contract, you didn't write it that way. Sometimes they're full of all these unprintable characters or weird characters. Sometimes in this particular case, one of our pilot projects, they had 002 grading, 003 grading, 004 grading, 005 grading, and it's hard to remember which one applied to which county. And so we can change the name on that list if that it would be helpful to you for just a usability point of view. So in this case, we renamed each of the lists to indicate which county applied, and that was helpful to the inspectors on that project. So we are happy to do this for you. You would just need to send an email to Construction Help and say, hey, I'd like these lists to be, the name to be changed to make it more useful for our inspectors. And in general, there might be other things. I think the authorized rate on seal, I think it's, I can't remember if it was 0.14 or something like that. There's some kind of rate of spread of seal or thickness, things like that. If there's some change to those kinds of standards, then we are happy to change that. Or if it's different on one project than others, we can make that change. Tips and tricks. I did want to mention that when you look at the URL, if you're on a PC and you see the URL in a list, the line code is the list itself. The actual name of it from a URL perspective is the line code. So if you're in line code 1 and you know you're going to go to line code 47, you don't have to go back out and search for it or whatever. You can just go up to the top of the page and change this to 47, and you'll go navigate immediately to list 47. Also, I've been telling people at the regional workshops about how you can approve multiple things at once. I just want to mention that to you guys. You can approve many items at once, and this works the same as everywhere else, but if you go into a given list, for some reason, we don't have the approve reject view set up right for this, but we will change that. So right now you might have to do it on the all items view. But if you select, and you can see here how it's selected, whichever items that you want to approve, and you're ready to approve them, then you can select a whole bunch of items, however many you want, and then you go up to the items ribbon up at the top left, and just like the list ribbon shows you all the things you can do with the list as a whole, the items ribbon shows you all the things you can do with an individual selected items. And so if you've selected several items and go to the items menu and do approve, reject, and approve, it will approve all the items. If you put in a comment, all of them will have the same comment. So it's like if you want to handle a bunch of things at once, that is a way you can do it. That works also in your other lists and libraries that you need to approve things. If you have a library, it would say browse something, library instead, but you'd pick the individual document ribbon, and then it would have the approve, reject as one of the choices. Okay, best practices. I need to tell you a little bit about how this is working, and how it differs a little bit from HiCAM, so that I can tell you about some things to help yourself here. So we have a control list called project line codes, and HiCAMS writes your contract information to it, and it's going to be automatically updated by HiCAMS every time a change is made to the line code. So like if you add more line codes by a supplemental agreement, they will be added into this list, and we will use that information in those line code lists. I mentioned before that the pay items are cross-referenced, so we can tell which format the list should be in. There's 38 different formats. And we use the WBS and other information, like what modification, contract modification information, to make this bill to choice list. I've mentioned that ticket book items will not get pay record lists, and you can read this list if you want to, but you can't modify it. And then they also are writing us the substitutable material list, and that'll also be updated by HiCAMS every time a change is made to the substitutable materials, if you add new choices or you delete some of the choices. So here's the thing. We're building a list, and we're referring to information from project line codes and substitutable materials. So let's say we build a list called 025 thermoplastic paving lines, we're going to give you Bill 2 choices out of the project line code. So there was the original WBS, another WBS, and then that WBS with supplemental agreement 6. So that's the choices we're going to give you as your Bill 2. We're going to take the first unit price that we find, and that is going to be the unit price. And then we're going to take the substitutable materials that are associated with line code 25. So everything we have is tied together on the SharePoint side by this line code 25. And so what that means is, let's say you have a supplemental agreement 7 and you go, you know, I am only going to do white lines with that, so I'm going to delete yellow and black. If you delete yellow and black, you're deleting it for the whole line code, not just for that supplemental agreement. It's because on the SharePoint side, we are tying everything to the line code. Similarly, if you want to change the unit price, you're changing it, well, either we won't pick it up at all, or you're changing it for the whole line code. So if you need to change substitutable materials or unit price, we need you to put it in a new line code number, because otherwise you're going to mess up this line code. So I think so if you're changing the unit price for a pay item, use a new line code, because we might want to have 25 thermoplastic paving lines at $2.50, and then you could put in another line code which might be 150 for thermoplastic paving lines at $2.75. And if you change the substitutable materials, just realize you're changing it for everything. And so you can do it, but if you don't want to change it for everything, if it's really important to keep it separate, you can make a new line code just for that piece of how much that that piece of quantity that you want to restrict to certain substitutable materials. If you ignore this and do it anyway, it does not mess up what is sent to HighCamps, because when you're reporting pay records, what we send to HighCamps is the quantity. We are not sending it the price. We will send it this WBS that you choose, but if let's say you went ahead and deleted yellow and black, then you just wouldn't be able to report any more yellow or black. And if you decided you needed to, then you'd have to go add them back in. So we report quantity and we report substitutable materials. But the unit price that is here is just used for the reporting aspects to help you figure out your estimate information before you go into HighCamps and do it. A couple of advanced features. I don't know that anybody's actually using this yet, but if you need to spread costs proportionately across multiple WBSs, this is a Bill 2 choice that will do that intermediate step for you and help spread it across multiple WBSs in the same proportion as in the original contract. So let's say in the paper process, you have an inspector recording measurements and somebody checks the calculations, and then you approve the pay record, and then the HighCamps technician was going to enter it in, and if there was 2 different WBSs and one was going to get 25% of the cost and one was going to get 75% of the cost, then the HighCamps technician would enter that pay record as 2 different entries in HighCamps. So they are doing that as sort of a manual step in between and spreading that cost across the different funding sources. But with the online process, there's not a stop. You approve it, and that whole thing is going to go in, and you've picked one WBS. You can't pick 2 different WBSs. So we have a new way to do that, and it is called spread. And so this is what happens. If you choose spread, and we want to make sure that the pay record is fully filled out before you save it to spread, because it's going to take that pay record and it's going to generate a separate pay record for each WBS that was on the original contract for this line code. So let's say we had that scenario where we have 2 different WBSs and somebody's paying for 25% and somebody's paying for 75% of the line code. Then if you save a pay record in there and you choose to bill it to spread, it will create 2 new pay records. One, and if you put in a quantity of 100, it would put 25 in one and 75 in the other. So here's the example. So the original record would change from quantity 100 to quantity 0, And then that 100 would be spread across 25 here and 75 there, and they would have those different WBSs from the line codes list, and it's going with the original contract items. It's not doing anything with the supplemental agreements or whatever. That original record has now got a quantity of 0 and a PR status of spread. So it really isn't going to go to HiCAMS, but that is where your inspector measurements, comments, and attachments are. So that's the original record. But then we created these separate records to facilitate getting the information into HiCAMS. Now it creates them, so it's really just a step for you. You still can go and change them at this point. They haven't been approved, they're not locked. But if you just want to do that straight out, take this 100 and split it into 75 for that one and 25 for that one, then you can do this and then just approve all 3 of these records and it will go. If you need to make further adjustments, then you can do that, because these are actually in the form of adjustment pay records, where it's just a straight out quantity going to a WBS, and all the measurement information is in this original record. So the reviewer would check on that just like usual, and then the resident office would approve all 3. The original record, it's not really going to go to HiCAMS, but it's going to be in there. And then these other 2 will go to HiCAMS and then be locked. If you need to use this, projects that have like a lot of, or multiple WBSs, they're trying to split information between, this may make it easier, particularly if you're doing a lot of measurements. If you're just putting in a quantity, you could say, oh, I'll just make one record for 25 and one for 75. But if you're putting in measurements, that stop in between doesn't happen anymore, and you need a way to be able to proportionately split your quantity among the different WBSs that you're supposed to be billing to. So if anybody has wants to use this and needs to kind of go into it in more depth, we'll be happy to work with you on that, because there's not that many people that are going to need it, but if you do, I know it might be confusing.
And there was a question about, do you know how much goes into each WBS element?
Oh, okay, good question. It sets it up with the same proportion that is in the original contract. So that is to say, without regarding any supplemental agreements or anything like that, if it goes and looks at those proportions, adds up the amounts and figures out what the proportion is, and splits the quantity that was in this pay record according to that same proportional split. And then you can adjust it if you like. So it might come up with oddball quantities. It might be 25.02 and 75.97 or whatever, and it makes sure that the total of all those quantities add up to the same quantity that was in the original record. The other more advanced thing, I guess, is design build, and that is going to be supported in April. From the SharePoint side, it will look slightly different, and you can see here a picture, but it really will act just the same. You will get one list for each line code as usual, like this design and construction, and then for each work item, underneath that line code, you'll also have a list. So you would get these individual lists, and the only difference from a SharePoint perspective is that the unit price in these are 0. So you would still report your clearing and grubbing so that we have the measurements, and they would be recorded in HiCAMS as work accomplished. But they would not drive any billing because they have this unit price 0. So all the money is sitting on the lump sum item at the top. So that's the way that's going to work, and that will be supported within the next month or so. And we have, I think, 3 different projects so far that are design build that have volunteered to try out pay records. So we'll be testing that out and hoping that gets squared away very quickly. Okay, it looks like this is not going to take 2 hours after all, unless we have a lot of questions. So get started. To get your project set up, it has to be activated in HiCAMS. You can go to the homepage of the construction sites and go to the bottom left where it says Pay Records Requests and click on that button and put in your project and your contact information and do a one-time identification of each user for their HiCAMS cross-reference. If they have already been set up for one project, they don't need to be set up again. This is just a one-time per user to make sure we've got that cross-reference situated so that HiCAMS knows who they are when we send records that somebody has either created or approved. And then if you run into problems or concerns, let us know. If you're trying this for the first time, don't wait until the day your estimate is due to try approving records. Because if we have problems, it might take us a day to work with you to fix them, and we want to make sure that you're not late on your estimate. So we would encourage you the first month through to give us a few extra days and try doing your approvals and stuff, making sure things get into HiCAMS correctly a few days before your estimate is due. I think this might be my last page. Well, the last page. This is the last page. As well as problems, of course, are going to go to construction help. Any kind of time you have a problem or a question or suggestion about construction sites on SharePoint, send it to construction help. If someone doesn't have access to the system, you need to send that to the help desk. But in general, once you're using it, if you have any kind of problems or situations, send it to construction help, and Deanna or someone else on our team will be happy to help you. We have a construction sites user group that meets quarterly. The next meeting will be June. If you feel full of ideas about how we can make the construction sites better, we would love to have you in our group. And it's going to be a quarterly meeting in Raleigh for usually about 3 or 4 hours. And so if you're interested in that, you can email us at Construction Help and we'll put you on the list. So now I open it up for questions, and we can go back in the presentation if there's anything people want to talk about. Did I go too fast? I hope not. We will be making this presentation available, and then as people start to use it, if you have questions about things, we are always open to helping people by phone or email. Please, if you have problems, please send them to Construction Help. Don't just call me, because I don't always get to my phone messages as quickly as you might like. The question is, can you use an adjustment pay record to change the date of an entry? I guess you could not really, because an adjustment pay record is a record in reference to an entry. You could put in a comment, so to speak, that says, hey, that entry was recorded on this date and that is incorrect. But I think that would not have the result that you're looking for. The result you're looking for is to get it to show up in a different month, right, from an estimate perspective. And so for that, we would need to probably work together with HiCAMS to get that changed. You can subtract, using adjustment pay record, you can basically subtract it out. We had a problem where someone accidentally, and we don't allow this future dates anymore, but we had a problem where someone accidentally put in something for December 2019 when they meant December 2018. And so it put it in the wrong month. And so what we effectively did is subtracted that same quantity off of December 2019 using an adjustment pay record, and then they had to just do a new pay record for the correct date. So that is a way you can correct it, but it's not exactly the same as just changing the date on it. Does that answer the question? Thanks. Right now we have 60 projects that have been signed up to use pay records. A lot of them just signed up in the last few weeks. I don't know if they've actually gone through an estimate or anything yet, but we have some projects that have been doing it for several months now, including Jason Rivenbark's projects in Wilmington, one of which had that over 400 pay items, which is a big project to try a pilot with. But so we feel pretty confident it is working fairly well. I'm sure there might still be a bug here and there, but I'm hoping that we can help everyone with this. And thanks particularly to Houston Allred, Jason Rivenbark, and Alan Stockton, and all of our pilot participants for helping us get through some of the early bugs in the system. Any more questions? The question is, if you have two WBS and have to split a line item to a WBS where it never existed, will SharePoint automatically add the line item to the WBS? So are you saying if you added a supplemental agreement to add a new WBS? Hey, Michael Canfield, maybe you should get on unmutes and tell me a little bit more clearly so I can make sure I understand the question. And Vanessa, the presentation, I don't know what the plan is for. I guess Natalie will put the recording somewhere, but I will take this webinar and put it in a PDF form on the construction help. So it'll be available on construction help from the main construction sites page probably this week.
And just to chime in, from the construction page on Connect, which is not construction help, but the construction unit page, we'll have the slides as well and the recording posted probably in the next week. Okay. And the link to get to that was actually in the email invite, or you can just email me, I'll send you links. Thanks.
So sometimes a line item only appears on one line item and it needs to be split into the other WBS. I guess I need an example. I'm not quite understanding the scenario. So can you unmute?
I think I know what they are referring to. Occasionally in HighCams, we're able to split, say you have a thermoplastic, 4-inch thermoplastic line item on WBS number 1.
Okay.
But they realize they actually need it on WBS number 2. HighCams provides the ability to split the line item off and shift a portion of the quantity from one WBS to the other. That should still be done in HighCams. The question would probably be, if a split is performed, will that functionality be sent over to SharePoint?
Exactly. That's exactly what I was asking.
I'd have to double check with HighCams about how that will be reflected to us. Let's say you had a quantity of 100 on WBS 1, and you want to split 50 of it off into WBS 2. What I would anticipate is that would come in as a other contract adjustment, and we would have a negative 50 coming in on WBS 1 and a positive 50 coming in on WBS 2 for that line item. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does actually, but hopefully we won't have to cross that bridge.
Yeah, well, so really you would have to do the split, just like any contract adjustment is going to have to be made in HighCams. And so my question is kind of, how does that contract adjustment get presented to me? So if it gets presented to me that way, then when you're doing spread, it's not going to pick it up because it was not part of the original contract, but it would be added, like for that line code, it would now be added as another WBS choice in the Bill 2 dropdown. So
it's not actually a new WBS now. It's an existing WBS. It didn't appear as a line item in WBS number 2, and it had to be split. The line item had to be split to where the WBS where it was not existing.
Well, it's not about whether it's a new WBS. It's about whether it was part of the original contract.
Uh-huh.
So if it wasn't part of the original contract, it's part of the. Oh, sorry, we're getting some feedback here.
You're fine.
Okay, if it's a contract adjustment to make that split, right?
Yeah, actually, you're going to take a portion. You're not going to actually add anything. You're going to take a portion
Right.
of the quantity that was allowed or estimated,
Mm-hmm.
and take a portion of that and add it to the other WBS.
Right.
But anyway, it's kind of an obscure question, and like I said, if we have to, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
Right. Well, it would.
We probably want to make sure, Alan, transactions, if we have to add a WBS, occasionally we have funding changes.
Mm-hmm.
So if we have to add a WBS in HighCam, we probably need to verify that that transaction will be sent over so that the new WBS would be an option in SharePoint.
It would. If it, let's say the way it works is, let's say this was line code 25. So line code 25 has 100 units of something, as 100 quantity of something, and it's billed to WBS 1. So you make an adjustment, a split in HighCams to split 50 of that quantity into WBS 2. So what would happen is HighCams would write to the project line codes, and it would say for line code 25, subtract 50 off of WBS 1, and then it would have another line that said for line code 25, add 50 to WBS 2. And so then we would make an adjustment in the list for line code 25 so that you now have a choice of WBS 1 and WBS 2. But the mechanism that it used to make that split is not, it would be an other change to the contract. And so what we were told by the people that were asking us from the user group to do this spread functionality is anything that was changed after the original contract, we don't want to reflect those in that proportional spread. So
say this was called a merge.
Uh-huh.
And it's not all that often, but occasionally we'll get a request that says, hey, we've run out of money on one. We want you to move and shift the entire rest of this contract over to a new WBS.
Mm-hmm.
So we actually have to add it, and we will merge all the existing quantities from one to a brand new WBS. So at that point, nothing more would be funded underneath the old WBS. It would all go on the new one.
Okay.
That transaction is done in HighCams. It's usually sent to SAP to create the new WBS, but
Mm-hmm.
I guess I just want to make sure that that transaction is going to be sent to SAP, to SharePoint as well, so the new WBS would then be an option.
Yes. Yes. If you make it a WBS that works for that line code in HighCams, then the HighCams will tell us, and then we will show it as a choice. And Rodney Connor is asking, in the original contract in HighCams, concrete curb, remove, replace line code has a quantity under only one of two WBS numbers. However, we do the work for this line WBS. How will this work for SharePoint and SharePlus? Did work for both, did work under both WBSs. Well, it will, if it's not in the if it's not in the contract or any of the modifications to the contract for that WBS, like let's say it was in the original contract for WBS 1, but you actually are trying to do some of the work under WBS 2, if it's not in HiCAMS, then you can't choose WBS 2. So you would have to go make a change to the contract to allow yourself to be reporting against that. So we're only allowing you to report work against the WBSs that are listed in HiCAMS for that line code. So basically what you're saying is you did something that wasn't really correctly represented in HiCAMS. So unfortunately you won't be able to report that way. You'd have to go fix it in HiCAMS first, and then it'll be reflected in SharePoint SharePlus. Does that make sense? If we look at, let me, I'll actually show you on the screen a typical, let me see if I can bring over a, I'll have to share a different, I'll have to share a different window to show a typical one. Hang on. Let me stop sharing and share again. Let's see. Where did the share button go? There it is. Okay. All right, so can you guys see the construction projects homepage? So if I go, actually, let me just type in. So if I go to this project, this is C203980, and if I go look, it's still counting up the line codes. You can see it's adding up. There's 400 and something. If I go in this line codes list, you'll see how it, let me find one that has been modified. Let's see if I can find one. Well, I'm not seeing anything right offhand. Let me see if I can. It's like all they did was add new stuff, new line codes. Well, let me look in the detail view and see if I can find one that has a modification. Well, here's the, here we did some modification to line 226. So if we do, if I look at 226, let me see, they only have one WBS on this one, so this may not have been the best example. Sorry. All right, so this one put in, they initially put in 5,295 as their WBS quantity, and then they put in another supplemental agreement to subtract off some quantity. So that, if you did that and you subtract off some quantity and by a supplemental agreement, and then by that same supplemental agreement you were adding in a different WBS, you would have another line here for 226 that for 8-inch water line that would add that quantity in again, but put it against a different bill to. But it would also be part of this same supplemental agreement, or it would be under an other, you know, whatever the modification type is, there would be some kind of modification type. So So because of this, if I go into line code 226, well, we've got it changed, so if it's a negative quantity, it won't give you that choice. But if we had put in a positive quantity, then it would give you that choice of the other bill to and the bill to drop down. Let me, actually, I think in our training sites, I forgot to mention in my webinar, I'll have to change this. If we have training sites in each division where that you can play around with pay records in the training site. So if we go to the training site, I think I have some line code that has 2 different WBSs. Okay, so here for line code 2, generic paving item, we have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 line of bill to WBS and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then we had a supplemental agreement. So they were all on that same paving item. And so then if I go into line code 2, and I was trying to add an item to this list, the default on the bill to is supposed to be the first one, which wasn't the first one, but it would show you all of the choices that were in the contract. And if I did spread, it would spread between the first 2 items that are not a supplemental agreement. It would spread proportionately between those 2. And so you can see it says that in the instruction here that if you want to spread this quantity across the funding source choices in the same proportion as in the contract, you would choose spread. So I think it will work correctly, but if we have some issue when it comes up, then we will be happy to work with you guys and work with HighCAMS if needed to make any adjustments. But we've got it set up basically so that anytime somebody makes a change to a contract in HighCAMS, to the information that is in this line codes list, which is the quantities, the pay items, the unit cost, any of those kinds of things. If you make a change to something that SharePoint cares about, then HighCAMS will send us another record or multiple records to update things, and we'll get the information on the SharePoint side. Does that make sense? Great, thanks. So feel free to try the play around with the pay records in these training sites. There's one in each division, and they have in them, it's maybe a weird looking project, but basically we have one list in here for each of our 38 different formats. So you can see what the different formats are. I guess some of them are very different, like, pipe plugs. You just put in what size of pipe it is, and it will just immediately put in that amount of cubic yards that corresponds to that pipe diameter. So the format is very different depending on what it is you're reporting. Any more questions? Okay, I think I'm done, Natalie.
Thank you very much, Alan, and I appreciate it. You guys, if you have any questions, you can always contact construction help at ncdot.gov. We will be posting the stuff, and the link that is in the invitation is the link to our website to get to the posting on the construction unit side. Thanks for joining us. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.